Hvaljen Isus i Marija. U ovom videu gost nam je bio Young, stručnjak za šerijat i islamski radikalizam. Željeli bismo samo napomenuti da je cilj ovog videa da se pokaže koliko je šerijat, odnosno nauk islama, teška zabluda. Ovom prilikom pozivamo na mir sve ljude. Svaki oblik nasilja jasno želimo reći da osuđujemo i ograđujemo se od svakog poziva na nasilje. Neka ovaj video bude uvid kakva skandalozna i zabludna učenja uče na najpoznatijim islamskim sveučilištima. Mir vama! I dobro večer, evo nas dragi gosti. Ovdje smo večeras sa jednim stručnjakom za islamski radikalizam i za šerijat. Evo, ovdje smo ja, moja malenkost Pax Vobiscum i Young, znači gospodin koji je stručnjak za islamski radikalizam, i ova tema večeras će biti malo o šerijatu, o problemima u radikalnom islamu, i možete se spojiti ukoliko želite, no nećemo u ovoj emisiji govoriti toliko nećemo se spajati sad, da se gosti spajaju i da iznose puno svoja mišljenja. Željeli bi jednostavno našeg gosta čuti i da on kaže odgovore na naša pitanja, da ga pitamo razna pitanja koja nas zanimaju. Tako da, evo, znači ovaj cijeli intervju će biti na engleskom i drago mi je da sam pozvao Lloyda, puno sam o njemu naučio i od njega naučio. I evo ga, znači sad ćemo preći na engleski, ako ko ima kakvo pitanje, slobodno neka upita, i evo, ovo će trajati negdje sat i pol. So, good evening, and this was a short introductionary on my language, and here is Young. Lloyd, how are you?
Dzień dobry Państwu, mam na imię Young, jestem z RPA, jestem w Polsce. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your channel.
So this was Polish.
That was Polish, yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and Young, let me just say a few things about him. And Young, he is expert on Islamic radicalism, and he's very well educated about Sharia law and books about fiqh and so on. So he's owner of a YouTube channel called Young, and he's much into the Sharia. He's not so much into the Quran or Hadith. He's not into that, but what he examines is the Sharia and Sharia law, and also history, mysticism, and so on. And so, Lloyd, I would like you to say what your channel is about. Could you tell us in brief what your channel is about, and also about yourself? What is your field of study in Islam?
Yeah, thank you. So I lived for 11 years in the Middle East. I worked for a long time in national defense. So I consulted and worked with government, military, and law enforcement to protect critical infrastructure and to protect military bases and borders from, obviously, people crossing those borders and causing harm in the country, be it blowing up important national facilities or killing people. And so in this way, I was exposed to a lot of the Middle East. I traveled extensively across the entire Middle East. I saw a great deal of the dysfunction in the Middle East, and this made me curious to understand. So I started to read and study everything that I could. I was working with these people, living with these people, traveling, staying in their countries. I've been to all the Gulf countries and more. And then I started to study anti-terrorism at university online. And I studied through university in Holland, Leiden. And it struck me that the university was refusing to ask any important or difficult questions. And if you asked an important or difficult question, you would be shouted down. There were Muslims who were technically on the course, but these people were there really just to patrol the conversation and to make sure that if anything stepped out of line of the Islamic orthodoxy, they would complain to the university and they would get that conversation shut down immediately. So we could discuss Christian terrorism, Buddhist terrorism, you name it, but came to Islam, And the dean also somehow refused to allow any further in-depth looking into Islam. I was working with Middle East governments. The Muslim Brotherhood was a serious problem, and he refused to discuss the Muslim Brotherhood as anything but this wonderful, warm, fuzzy group of wonderful people who, it was a complete joke. And then when I started to, and then of course Paris happened, the Bataclan, and then of course eventually I got access to a lot of the training materials that were used by ISIS in Raqqa. And when I posted this on the forum and I said, look, hey, these are just normal Sunnis following these books, these are the Sharia manuals, I got banned from the forum. I got thrown out. And this upset me greatly because I realized they did not want an honest discussion. And I realized what I was showing was standard, basic, orthodox Sunni Islam. The ISIS were not radicals. ISIS was simply following the Sharia to the letter. And so I decided to go and research deeper on my own. And from being banned from talking to 100, 150 university students, I've now had access to tens of thousands of people over the last few years.
Yeah, I understand. And as I saw, your former bodyguard, scuba diver, but also expert on military-grade long-range and wide area surveillance radar and thermal imaging systems. That means that you are in the, we can say, in security also.
Yeah, national defense, as I said. Yeah,
national defense, yeah.
So I made sure that ISIS, Al Qaeda, for instance, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, they did not attack and destroy critical targets in the Middle East. So they did not sneak across the borders and blow things up. And in cases where this did happen, I was often sent out to find a way to secure those locations from further attacks. So I traveled across the entire Middle East.
I understand. Can you tell me now, when you are on YouTube and you bring all these issues about Islam, do you receive death threats because of your work?
There've been one or two in the past, but generally I think people realize my background. They realize my training in security. So I think on that basis, they realize that I've done dangerous things. I've had training. So I have been in dangerous situations. I've dealt with danger. So I don't think that they are too keen to go that route because I actually have a history of this. So it's not something that they can easily threaten me with. Although they do try to make threats, but nowadays they try to, also the material that I bring, I find that they never actually address the material. It's too embarrassing, it's too damaging. So they try desperately now just to change the topic. Because one, I have security credentials that are real. I've experienced in the Middle East that is real. So they cannot, they can try, they can pretend, but they cannot undermine my actual knowledge, credentials, and experience. It's too, I have too much professional background in this for them to go, oh yeah, he doesn't know anything.
Are you familiar with jihadism in the Balkans area, and how much do you know about it? Because our channel is dedicated to the people with language on the Balkans, so they are our specific target, our language we talk. So I'm curious, are you familiar with jihadism in the Balkans, and how much?
Not usually. I am familiar with the fact that for centuries, the Muslims would attack, and of course, obviously, they occupied that region for a long time. There were hundreds of battles, dozens of wars. So the Balkans area has been under attack from Islam and has been influenced, obviously, historically by Islam. I do know that, so there's a great deal of experience with this, and of course, there were lots of forced abductions, slavery from the Balkans, as well as for instance, I know there's the Chechens who are, I think, part of that group, would fall within that geographical region and culture.
No. Okay, no, they are very much further part of the Russia. Okay, Balkans. Okay, yeah, you can say for Greece it is there.
Okay, so yeah, so obviously Turkey was close by. So then you're looking at, so there was a lot of incursions into that area, and of course, I had a friend from Serbia who explained to me how they had to flee, just like people fled from Lebanon.
Yeah, Serbia, of course, that is the Balkans. Yeah.
And of course, at one time during the Serbia war, NATO took the side of the jihadis, according to my friends at least. And the jihadis started just like they did in Lebanon. And of course, NATO took the side of the enemy.
can you explain us to our viewers in brief what Sharia is?
Islam claims to be a complete way of life. It is a social system, it is a legal system, it is a political system. It's called a deen. Islam claims to have a full legal system that can replace the Western legal system. So we're not talking about the Quran here. Muslims will desperately try to only talk about the Quran, but Islam claims to have a full legal system that can replace all of the laws of the West. They claim this is Allah's law, it is perfect. And of course, because it is a legal system, it is written in books. And we can go to those books and we can see what are they. The Quran doesn't contain writings on parking tickets. The Quran doesn't contain writings on, say, taxes for the sale of beef. So for that, you need to go into the Sharia, which takes those ideas from the Quran and the Sunnah and creates a legal system out of them. And those laws are written there, and we can go and read what those laws say about marriage, prayer, divorce, and jihad, for instance.
Yeah, I understand. And what do we do with the Muslims that doesn't want to implement Sharia or call themselves Quran-only Muslims? You know why I'm asking this? Because I saw in your one of your videos that there was a video with title Hadith Accuracy Ratings and Weak Hadith Explained. And in that video, you've explained about Hadith gradings, and I was really surprised about accuracy. I was taught, and Muslims always told me that Daif Hadiths, they are all false. But when
they're authoritative. They are
but when you will explain that to us. But when I saw your video, I was really shocked because I learned that Daif Hadiths don't have to be false at all. In other fact, their percentage is pretty big. So can you explain us, please? Here is the image from that video.
Yeah. Okay, so we're looking at a reprint of what is called the Fat al-Bari, the victory of the Creator, right? The victory of Allah, basically. So the hadiths are required to explain the Quran because the Quran is incomplete. It does not stand on its own. For instance, ask a Muslim, show me the names of all of Muhammad's wives in the Quran, right? He can't show them to you. Ask a Muslim to show you the 5 daily prayers written in the Quran. He cannot show that to you. Ask a Muslim for the Shahada, right? It says, show me the Shahada that you say, right? Show it to me in the Quran. Which page is it on? He cannot show it to you because it is not there. The Quran is incomplete. So these Quran-only Muslims are lying to you. According to Orthodox Islam, if a Muslim is Quran-only, he is an apostate. He is denying the Sunnah, which the Sunnah is called Wahi. It is revelation. It's considered revelation from Allah. It is as valid as the Quran. Now, so these Muslims are conveniently become Quran only when you show them the evidence of the very embarrassing hadiths and other sources of Islam. Now, the hadiths have different grades, but the Da'if hadith are considered fully authentic, fully reliable, and especially when they contain words from Muhammad, or when they are about Muhammad or from Muhammad. They are considered fully authentic, and laws are written on that basis. So the Sharia contains laws derived from that. So, as I said, you cannot find, now Muslims say I'm Quran only. You say, okay, so then are the names of all of Muhammad's wives lies? Is the Shahada to Muhammad a lie because it's not in the Quran? You see, so this causes them, this traps them in a serious problem. Now, notice here, the Fath al-Bari is a discussion. Now, we know as lay people, we know the hadiths, even the lay Muslims, but the scholars have access to a level of knowledge above the lay Muslim. They read what is called the tafsir of the hadith. Everyone knows the tafsir of the Quran, the commentaries on the Quran. These are commentaries on the hadiths, especially in this case, Bukhari, which is considered the most authentic, the most important of the hadith collections. And in this one, this is from Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the most important of the commentators. So in theory, one could consider him more important than Bukhari because he explained and elucidated, he did the exegesis of what these hadiths mean. So it says here, you can see that Imam Ibn Hajar would not have included weak hadith in the collections if he felt that they were not sources that were valid, right? Weak hadith, and it says here, are used to support opinions, because a weak hadith containing the words of the Prophet is preferred over opinion and personal reasoning. And this is the example set by all the scholars, including Imam Bukhari, right, who used them deliberately in his work, Al-Adab al-Mufrad. So notice, the Sahih is not the only work of Bukhari. He has other works, like this one called the Al-Adab al-Mufrad. So notice, they say here that a Sahih hadith has a 99 to 100% chance of being completely accurate. Hasan, 85% to 99% chance. So it can be as accurate as a Sahih hadith. And the Da'if hadith has a 45% to an 85% chance of being entirely accurate. And they say that even fabricated hadiths have a 45% chance of being accurate. Now, they also say the grading that these hadiths were given may have been wrong, or the fabricator might have spoken the truth on this occasion. Also, weak hadith can have up to an 85% accuracy rating. So they say if you got an 85% score on a test, would you say that was bad? No, you go, no, that's an A. That's excellent. So Muslims lie to us about weak hadiths. Weak hadiths are used in the Sharia. They're used to make laws, because not all content is in the Sahih. There's also content in these weak hadith. And it's not a comment on...
Yeah, actually, if I may interrupt you, when you say 45 to 85%, that is a really big percentage, because when you go, I don't know, maybe apply to work, maybe they want only 60% to pass the exam. And here we can see 45 to 85%. That is almost half, almost 50%. That is pretty big percentage to 85, really big. So I was really shocked about this. And go on.
No, so if you read the Sharia, if you go into the reliance of the traveler, for instance, the most common, the most popular of the Islamic manuals, because this reliance of the traveler was written for lay Muslims. It's used by scholars, but it's also used by lay Muslims. So if you read that, they'll explain that these hadiths are all valid. Muslims are required, they are obligated to believe them. And a Muslim who does not believe them is an apostate.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, very interesting. Now, what I am curious very much is Al-Azhar University, for example. So this is the most prestigious university Islamic in the world. And from your videos and your shows, I've learned that they approve much of the radical teachings, and that is also what shocked me. So could you show us controversially approved literature from this most prestigious Islamic university, Al-Azhar?
So mainly I will focus then. So let me share my screen, if you can unshare, and then I will take over. Okay. So this is the reliance of the traveler. Can you post a link to my channel in your description and also in the chat, please? Then all my videos have a link to the reliance of the traveler. It is called Reliance of the Traveler and the Tools of the Worshipper. Right. So this is written for lay Muslims to know everything about Islam. So I'll briefly show you. These are the contents. Now, Muslims will notice here, it starts with the certification of Al-Azhar. This is the most important of the Islamic universities, where the most imams are trained. The best imams come from Al-Azhar. Now, of course, Muslims will constantly claim that this book is not valid, that it's wrong, etc., etc. Sorry, let me just go back here. I made this. Just go back here. They will claim that everything that I say from this book is false. But notice, this book talks about prayer, the funeral prayer, zakat, fasting, the pilgrimage. They would have to prove that everything in this book is false for everything else to be false. Now, if the supposedly controversial laws that I will highlight are false, then they need to show me that the prayer is false. They'd have to show me exactly. Because if everything else is 100% correct, why would everything after that be totally false? That would make no sense. Also, why would Al-Azhar lie, right? So there is certification. Notice they speak here of the scholars, why they have to follow a scholar. That's why Muslims always ask, have you consulted a scholar? Well, I did. Now, they speak here of purification, the prayer. You can learn everything you ever wanted to know about Muslim marriage, divorce, you name it. And this includes marriage to infants. This includes having an infant child in your bed as an adult male. So if you're 35 and you decide you like that 6-month-old or that 2-year-old or that 3-year-old, you can marry her and she's your wife and you can take her to bed. That is covered in this. So let's go here, this section that says certification of Al-Azhar. So I will jump down here. So by the way, so Al-Azhar recognizes, of course, the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali schools. So it also recognizes the Jafari school of Islam, right? So it also recognizes the Jafari school, which is the Shia school of jurisprudence, so the Shia school of fiqh. Now, what we have here is, notice these warrants, okay? From the warrant of Sheikh Abdul Waqil Durubi, okay? This
if
is
you
the
can,
Imam.
if you can maybe zoom, yeah, zoom it a little bit.
well,
Yeah, great.
So this is the Imam of the Mosque of Darwish Pasha, Damascus, Syria. Obviously very important. So they state here, this man is qualified to discuss the Islamic law, okay? And so these people put their stamp of approval on this document. Notice we've got here, so I'll just go to the, Al-Azhar is the most important of these, but I'll just mention here, this is a textbook for teaching Islamic law to English speakers and as a legal reference for use by scholars, by educated laymen and students in this language. Okay, sorry, viewers, for some reason I'm just getting this wrong.
No problem. You can unzoom it if it is a problem, but it would be great if it can fit.
Let me. Yeah, it's because I. Okay, no. Let me just continue here. So notice this is the president of the International Islamic Institute. Okay, of Islamic Thought. So he is a member of the Islamic Fiqh Academy at Jeddah in Saudi Arabia and the president of the Fiqh Council of North America. Very senior. And he says this man and this book, this has a sound understanding of sacred law, of Islamic law, and this translation is superior to anything produced by Orientalists in the way of translations of major Islamic works. So clearly he's endorsing this as a very important, very good manual for learning about Islamic law. Okay, so now let's get to Al-Azhar. Notice it says his certification of Al-Azhar from the Al-Azhar Islamic Research Academy. And it says, they say here, we certify that the above mentioned translation corresponds to the Arabic original and conforms to the practice and the faith of the Orthodox Sunni community. There is no objection to printing and circulating this book. And this is from the seal of Al-Azhar, from the General Director of Research, Writing, and Translation. And this was February 1991. And you can see here's the seal in Arabic. So Al-Azhar, the world's most important Islamic university, this is where Barack Obama gave his first speech. He went to Al-Azhar because it's the seat of learning of all Islamic civilization, at least Sunni civilization. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, great. And if you have maybe some problematic or controversial teachings from Al-Azhar, I would be glad to hear about that.
Yeah, so this is approved by Al-Azhar because it's accurate. So, for instance, let's look up the words prepubescent. Okay, so let's maybe start with the words prepubescent. Okay, so let's just search through the Reliance for the words prepubescent. You can see the Arabic here on the right. So when a free woman asks to marry a suitor who is suitable, okay, the guardian must marry her, whether she is virgin or non-virgin, and whether she is prepubescent or not. Now, why would a prepubescent ask to be married? Okay, that's a question that needs to be asked. But so whether prepubescent or not, let's continue. A guardian may not marry his prepubescent daughter to someone for less than the amount typically received as marriage payment by similar brides. Nor may he marry his prepubescent son to a female, okay, for less money than would normally be given for an adult. So you can marry a prepubescent child to an adult as long as you get paid the right amount of money. Right, let's continue. So now notice they speak here of the divorce of a wife who is prepubescent. So clearly, if you can get married, you can get divorced as a prepubescent. Now notice here on Quran 465, which is the discussion of the waiting period, the iddah. They say here in this rule, N9.2, a waiting period is obligatory for a woman divorced after intercourse. So a woman is divorced after intercourse, whether she and her husband are prepubescent or are not prepubescent. So they're speaking here of a waiting period is obligatory in case she's pregnant of a woman who is divorced after sex with her husband, even if she is prepubescent. She still has to wait to see if she is pregnant. And intercourse means copulation. Do you think
really,
this is clear? Yeah.
Really shocking from that book. Yeah, really shocking. Yeah.
So this is exactly what we're referring to. Now, the waiting period for a woman who does menstruate, whether prepubescent or postmenopausal, who does not menstruate, is 3 months. So the Quran is referring to children. There is no lower age limit. Okay, there is no lower age limit to this.
And why do liberal Muslims today don't talk about this? Imams and sheikhs in the West. Why do they don't speak about this? What do you think? To Muslims and non-Muslims.
Because this is too embarrassing. This is far too embarrassing for Muslims. They cannot deal with the. So let me find something. This is too embarrassing. The Sharia is too explicit. It is too clear. That they cannot have people learning this because it brings shame to Islam. Anything that brings shame to Islam must be denied, because to reveal a shameful act is itself a shameful act in the Sharia. To reveal something shameful is itself shameful. Therefore, anything shameful must be hidden. It must not be brought to light. So let me actually show you something here that will be useful to you. I will. Notice here, this is Islam QA. Islam QA is the most visited Islam fatwa, Islam question and answer website in the world.
If you can zoom it a little bit, maybe.
Yes, I will do. Notice this is called fatwa number 22442. It's zoomed in now. On acting and the ruling on marrying young girls. You can see here is the fatwa number. Right? What is the ruling on blah, 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 and why in Islam are you allowed to marry children of girls below 10 without their permission? In other words, you can marry this girl without her permission. So her father can give her to you in marriage without her permission. I'm still zooming in. And can you justify this ruling of Islam child marriage? This is a legitimate question. Okay? So this person is asking, and they say that, so they say here, marrying a young girl before she reaches the age of adolescence is permitted in the Sharia. There's scholarly consensus on this point. All the scholars of all the 4 schools of Islamic fiqh, of the jurisprudence, agree. And they speak here of Quran 65:4, which we all know this verse, okay? And they say here, girl who does not have periods because she's young and has not yet reached puberty, right? This clearly indicates that Allah has made this a valid marriage. So
really shocking, really shocking, yeah.
Yeah. And notice, if now they say here, does not mean that it is permissible to have intercourse with her. Trust me, this is false. They are lying here. Now, it says here, there is nothing, notice here, there is nothing in the hadith of Aisha to set an age limit or to forbid that, they mean sex, in the case of a girl who is able for it before the age of 9. There is no lower age limit for a marriage in Islam, and there is no lower age limit for you to have sex with a child if you think she is ready.
So it doesn't have to be 9, right? It can be lower.
6 months, 3 months, a year. There is no lower age limit.
According to Sharia, yeah.
According to the Sharia, according to the scholars, yes. The law of Islam, this is it. Yeah. Very,
very interesting, yeah.
So there's a question from Siam. So I just want to answer that question.
Yeah.
About Islamic waqf.
Yeah. So, I don't know what that is. Can you also explain just in brief what is waqf?
Waqf technically means endowment. What this means is that, for instance, when you die, let's say, you can pass on an inheritance to someone, right? It's something you inherit, right? Or you put money away and you save it so that when you retire, you get this endowment paid out. This thing that you own is given to you, right? So think of it that way. So waqf really is an endowment. When Muslims conquer land, this land belongs to Allah. And the Muslims, because Allah is too weak to come to earth, because Allah cannot enter into his own creation, according to Islamic sources, Allah cannot even enter into earth. What you have is the Muslims have to look after it. So if they lose that land, it still belongs to Islam. It is still Islamic land, and therefore they must take it back. At some point, they are obligated to reinvade and take that land back. Israel must be taken back. Spain must be taken back. Your countries that were previously invaded must be taken back. That land is Islamic. And according to Islam, the entire earth was made as a place for Muhammad and his entire... So Muslims must inherit the entire earth. But Waqf basically relates to land that has been conquered before remains forever Islamic, and they must conquer that land again. It is always under threat.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And about Al-Azhar, do you have maybe something more, or this is it for now, or in the Reliance? Yeah, can you tell us, please, a bit what is this book, Reliance of the Traveler? Also for our viewers, I know about it. You can also show these controversial topics, but just to say what is this book about? What is this book and how it is, how do Muslim authorities watch on it, and so on.
So this book was written. So there are thousands of books in Islam. There are thousands and thousands of books. The Muslim authorities instituted various programs. They funded various institutions, universities, and scholars to specifically translate the most important books first. This was one of the very, very first books, if not the first Islamic law book to be translated. This is considered the very best of these books. Now, look, it's not the only one. This is a book for lay Muslims, and this is a book because the internet age and so on, we've got this information, fortunately, but this is perhaps the very first Islamic law book to be translated into English because it is considered so important. The money was provided, the funding, and so this was approved. So universities have been translating the most important things. For instance, there are certain books that are considered. So the Pakistani government had a program called the 100 most important books in Islam. So they funded the translation of the 100, what they considered the 100 most important books in Islam. This book is considered so important that it had to be translated. So, Muslims had to have this knowledge. Now, of course, the internet has made it difficult for them because suddenly people like us have access to this.
So Reliance of the Traveler. That is the name of the book of this. It is a fiqh manual, or?
Yes, it is. Technically, it's from the Shafi'i school, right? The school of Shafi. However, the difference is that most fiqh manuals are very specialized. Like one will be focused on marriage. One will be focused on selling slaves. Another one is focused on, I don't know, land rights. Okay, you'll have different fiqh. One focused on divorce. So they tend to have a focus in one area and then vague generally on others. This book, though, is very detailed. It's a compilation from multiple different scholars and from multiple different schools. And so it has a little bit of everything. It's very detailed from A to Z. This book is unique in the Islamic legal texts. It is unique.
And I've heard from your videos that maybe in Christian or non-Muslim eyes we see maybe, here are Hanafis, here are Hanbalis, here are Shafis, but in eyes of the Islamic scholars it is all Sunnah, and it is these are minor differences, as I realized.
So, yes. Okay, let me just say this. So, as I said in the beginning, let me go back to the beginning here. Notice I mentioned this here. Now, this is, notice, the four Sunni schools of Islamic law, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali, are identical in approximately 75% of the legal conclusions, while the remaining questions are just variances within a single family. Okay, different viewpoints sometimes are reflected in even a single school. So because there is potential confusion, the scholars created what is called the ijma, the consensus, right? They created the consensus. The consensus is the agreement of the scholars. Now, they say they are identical in about 75% of the legal conclusions. So the ones where they differ, the ones where they don't have exactly the same views, are cosmetic issues that do not affect. Like, for instance, all Christians agree that Jesus lived on earth, Jesus died, Jesus rose again, right? Now we can debate whether Jesus wore white, whether he wore cream, whether he wore beige. Those are things that different. The Catholics can say Jesus wore white tunic. The Baptists can say Jesus wore beige tunic, and I don't know, another group can say that Jesus wore a blue tunic with red stripes. What the heck? that is a completely separate issue that is not important to the reality of Christ's life, death, and resurrection. It doesn't change the doctrine or the dogma in any way. That's a cosmetic detail that's not relevant or not important. So when they speak of the other 25%, these are issues that are not important. For instance, does the Muslim pray with his hands here by his face? Does he pray with his hands by his hips? Does he pray with his hands by his chest? Those are the 25% where they differ, where the one says, do you grow your beard 4 fingers or 2 fingers? Do you grow your beard 5 fingers away from your cheeks, or do you grow them next to your cheeks? Those are cosmetic issues that are not relevant to the doctrine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, really interesting, because these are such details they maybe in Islam love to watch on, if I could say. Really interesting. You wanted to show us something also from Reliance of the Traveler?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we can look at a couple of other things just so that people can spend time reading this. Okay. So for instance, stoning. So we can look at what is stoning. Okay. Now they speak here of the initial stoning at Mina. This is from the Hajj. Okay. But so we can see there's loads of discussion here, and so let me run through this. Okay, so I've got various highlights here.
So if I may guess, stoning was probably, I don't know, they play soccer with stones, or
no?
Is it that, or they play so they throw stones like children, or is it that?
No.
Like
No.
So what can it be? Okay, please tell me.
So I have a read here. So if a woman has sex outside of marriage, and she had the ability to remain chaste or to remain a virgin, right? So if the offender is someone with the capacity to remain chaste, then he or she is stoned to death, right? Someone with the capacity to remain chaste, meaning anyone who has had sexual intercourse with their spouse in a valid marriage, okay? So this is someone who's valid, but someone who does it outside of marriage, okay? But notice here, a young girl, prepubescent, a person is not considered to have the capacity to remain chaste if he or she has only had intercourse in a marriage that is invalid, in which case it's not their fault, or is prepubescent at the time of marital intercourse. Prepubescent. Because a prepubescent child cannot refuse sex with her husband.
So it is so mathematically set that you just cannot escape it. So if you are in a bad math, you're in a lot of trouble, we may say.
Yeah. So Islam still has stoning. Muslims will deny it. It's not in the Quran. Well, there's a lot of things, like I said, that are not in the Quran. The names of Muhammad's wives are not in the Quran. So why are we calling these women by these names? If they're...
You know what is funny to me? I've listened to your videos, and I've learned from you that you've said, that was really interesting to me, that this final revelation is actually these thick books, because
yes,
in Quran we don't. In Quran it is written that it is the everything is said in the Quran, and you know now how to work by the Quran, but it is not true, because as you mentioned, how to walk around the Kaaba and how to bow and prostrate and do all the things and 5 daily prayers, it is all in the hadiths. But also in the hadiths are some specific stuff that needed to be revised in those Islamic law books. Is that correct, what I said?
Okay, so the Quran is abrogated. Everyone knows this. It's discussed in the Reliance. There's a detailed section which discusses, and I have videos on my channel about abrogation. I have numerous videos about abrogation. So the Quran is abrogated. Newer verses abrogate older verses. Now, what people don't realize is the hadiths are also abrogated. A new hadith abrogates a hadith that came before. A new Quran verse abrogates a Quran verse that came before. Allah replaces that old verse with the new verse. But a hadith that is newer than the Quran verse also replaces the Quran verse. So a hadith can abrogate the Quran verse.
So hadith is stronger than Quran.
Yes.
That is really, really funny.
And a new Quran verse can abrogate an older hadith. So the Quran and hadith abrogate each other and abrogate themselves.
And these books claim that also.
Yes, of course. So Now, there are videos on my channel about this in detail, where I show this in detail. Now, but this is the understanding of the scholars, not the lay Muslims, right? Now, understand that because of all of this confusion as to what is abrogated, what is not, they had to write the ijma, the consensus, the agreement of all the scholars, right? What do we agree is still left over after all of this abrogation? And that ijma is in the sharia. The sharia is the final word, the final interpretation, the best interpretation of all the confusion. This is where the confusion is taken away, and now we are left with what is left, right? And the sharia can never be abrogated. The Quran is abrogated, but the sharia can never be. Look here when it says, the ruling agreed upon by the scholars, right, is an authoritative part of sacred law that is obligatory to obey. Obligatory to obey, and it is not lawful for a Muslim to disobey. Mujtahids of another era, of a later time, okay, nor can mujtahids of succeeding era make the thing an object of new ijtihad, of new reasoning. They cannot. It's already been spoken. It's already been decided by the former Muslim scholars. They've decided this is what it means, cannot change it. Because the ruling on it, verified by scholarly consensus, is an absolute legal ruling, which does not admit of being contravened, in other words, contradicted, changed in any way, or annulled. It cannot be annulled. It cannot be abrogated. To annul something is to cancel it. Abrogation means cancellation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And you know what is funny also, because about those four schools, I've heard from Sheikh Al-Hakim, you know him from YouTube probably, and he said, as I remember, that these four imams, they were not best in knowledge in the history of Islam. But if I remember, he said that they had the most of the followers. So I don't know what do you know about that, and how it is that these four schools prevail, or why did Muslims accept those four schools and said, "Hey, this is the final interpretation of Sharia, and nothing else is Sharia." Do you know maybe about that, or?
Okay, so you must understand that it is legal for Muslim scholars and for Muslims to lie. It is not only legal for them to lie, it is obligatory. Now, I've covered this in my channel. I have 4 videos. One is like 5 minutes, one is like 7 minutes, 12 minutes. And then I've got a couple that are like 90 minutes and 2 hours or 1 hour or whatever. These are quite detailed. They're going to, so I've got short ones and long ones, okay? So don't tell me you don't have 5 minutes to watch a short video. So it is obligatory in Islamic law to lie. If something is going to cause doubt, if something is going to cause a weakness, Muslims must lie. It is obligatory, right? Now, so notice here, it says hadiths of both types are obligatory for a Muslim to believe in, okay? So this is Sahih as well as Hasan, and they even speak of Da'if later, but let's go here to this thing called the Mujtahid Mutlaq. Now, the positions held by the most learned of the companions on legal questions, and those of the scholars who came after them, and on which of these positions there is scholarly consensus. So all the questions in Islam had to be changed into law, right? So they looked at what did Muhammad say? What did the companions say? What did they do on various issues? And these were then transcribed, and this then formed the scholarly consensus. This was collected. It took like 800 or 900 years for the scholarly consensus of the ijma to form. It was only finished in like probably the 16th century. And they stole a lot from the Greeks, from the Greek philosophers, as well as from some European philosophers. They borrowed knowledge as well, and vice versa. Now notice here, okay, they speak of this here. An absolute expert in Islamic legal reasoning, a mujtahid mutlaq, such as Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi, or Ahmad. These are the founders of the 4 schools of fiqh. They are considered absolute experts, absolute scholars. They are mujtahids mutlaq. They cannot make a mistake.
Who said for them why are they had to be accepted? Why do so somebody needed to say, hey, these guys, they are the most they are the best expert we have, and you have to obey it or you will die or something. I don't know.
So,
something happened.
Pretty much that is how Islam does it. You don't agree with us, we'll kill you, which actually has happened, which is the case. But notice someone who becomes a qadi, someone who becomes a judge or an imam in Islam, he must know the positions of the scholars of sacred law regarding their consensus, and he must not contradict their consensus, which is unlawful, with his own reasoning. Right? Now these scholars, basically, I need to find the reference here, but Allah's hand is over the group. And therefore, it says in the hadith that Allah's hand is over the group, and he will not allow the group to agree on an error. So therefore, they cannot be wrong. Now, if let me try and find a reference for you. It says here, notice that lots of people make up their own nonsense. Okay, lots of people come along with their own nonsense, but they notice here, it is quite otherwise with the 4 schools whose imams have spent themselves in checking the positions of their schools, explaining what can be rigorously authenticated and what could not be. So they have, and their scholars have thus achieved safety from textual corruption and have been able to discern the genuine from the poorly authenticated. So because of their rigorous nature of examining the Sunnah and deciding what is true, what is the law of Allah, these people have come to an accurate representation, and therefore they are to be believed. And there's a lot more detail I can go into. Now notice here, I'll add this. Okay, so a ruling agreed upon by all the mujtahids in the Islamic community is in fact the ruling of the community. The community is divinely protected from error. My community shall not agree on an error, according to the hadith. And Allah is not wont to make my community concur on misguidance. So therefore they could not make a mistake. They cannot be wrong. That which the Muslims, and they mean here the scholars, consider good, Allah considers good. And they say there's the validity of scholarly consensus, and the Prophet said, Allah's hand is over the group, and whoever dissents from them departs to hell. This is their justification. So Muhammad is the example. Then the greatest scholar in Islam after him is a man called Ghazali, Al-Ghazali. And then after Ghazali...
But wasn't Ghazali Sufi or something?
All the major scholars basically were Sufis. All the very top scholars in Islam are
That
Sufis.
is also what controversial to me. When I realized that Grand Mufti, is it Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar? He's Sufi. And as I heard from someone that link between Shiism and Sufism is Shiism and Sunnism is Sufism. Is that correct?
So the link, yes, the bridge. So the Sufis will tell you, the scholars will say that the bridge between Shia and Sunni Muslims, between Shiism and Sunnism, is the Sufi beliefs, is Sufism. Now, understand the rector of Al-Azhar, the most important Islamic seminary in the world, the rector is a Sufi. The guy before him was also a Sufi. And I have no idea, but we can always go and check if the guy before him was also a Sufi.
But it is the most prestigious Sunni university in the world. How it is possible? Can you explain us?
Because we're not supposed to know. We're not supposed to look this deeply. Because Islam actually, you know what? So let me bring up something that is going to be relevant here. I need to bring up something. So I need to bring up something here. This will be up in a moment. So Al-Azhar not only teaches imams of the 4 schools of fiqh, it also teaches the 7 schools of Sufism. So now why would they also teach the 7 schools of Sufism if Sunni Islam has nothing to do with Sufism? Sufism is integral to Islam. Let me show with an example here. This is going to be very important. It's obviously we're not diving very, very deep into any one topic, but I want to bring this up. So let me show you this. What people do not know, what people do not realize, is that Islam is divided into multiple levels. There are 4 basic levels. The lowest level, the absolute lowest level. Okay, wait, let's start here. There are 2 divisions in Islam. There's what is called the sharia, the law, all the regulations. And then the other side is what's called the haqa'iq. This is like the sacred knowledge or the secret knowledge, the gnosis, right? Because few people know that Islam claims to be Gnostic. It claims to be a Gnostic religion, to be derived from the Gnostics. The scholars are Gnostics, and the Sufis are Gnostics. They claim this. The Sufis claim to be Gnostics. The Reliance will bluntly tell you, and so will many, many other Sharia books and books by the scholars will tell you that Islam is Gnostic. So it is not Christian, it's anti-Christian, of course. Now, there are 2 divisions. The one is the Sharia, the law, which is the legislative side, the rules you must follow. This is like the Pharisees when Jesus criticized the leaders of the Pharisees and says, you've made all these laws that destroy the goodness of God's law, right? So this is legislative. It's dry bunch of rules. Sharia is about obeying Allah. It is the outer, the external expression. Just follow these rules and shut up. It is the outer practice. It's the first plain level of meaning. The other side, the other division is the hakika. This is the occult side, the spiritual side. This is about knowing Allah. This is purely for the higher level of the scholars, the highest levels of the scholars. Basic imams don't have this. This is the batin, the inner, the esoteric knowledge. It is inner, direct, personal knowledge, gnosis. Okay. Then you have 4 levels in Islam. You have the ibadah. This is the literal level, the zahir, the external. The scholars call it Islam for the masses. The masses are legislative subjects, and the scholars are administrators. They are lawyers, right? They're not priests, they're lawyers. They are managing the Muslim subjects. They impose the laws. Then you have another level called the ishara, the implied, the allusion. This is reading between the lines, right? And this is for the legislative practitioners, your imams, right? This is what is intended, if not explicitly said, by the Quran and other sources. Then you have another level called the lataif, the nuances, the subtleties for the spiritual practitioners. And then you have the haqaiq, the reality, the truth, the ultimate truth, the divine essence, the gnosis. This is for the advanced spiritual practitioners. These 2 levels are exclusive to the Sufis. Now notice the Sharia is imposed on all Muslims, but the Hakika is exclusively for the knowledge of these guys. 3 and 4, basically. So for the Sufis had the... Now, you must understand, Sufism is like Kabbalah, right? Very similar to Kabbalah, like Jewish Kabbalah. In fact, Kabbalah, you can trace it back to an Islamic practice. The Jews had Merkava mysticism. Here you've got... So this is really... But technically, they're trying to rip off the Jewish practices. And so these guys are the Kabbalists. These guys are the higher level spiritual practitioners. They've got a complete understanding of Islam.
And I've listened in your videos that in books of Islamic sacred law and in books of fiqh, there is also Sufism. This stuff is mentioned in books of fiqh, right? That approves Sufism in other way.
Of course, I mean, if it's being taught at Al-Azhar as a legitimate part of the curriculum and for the higher level scholars only, then clearly it's legitimate. Because most of the scholars that developed the Sharia were Sufis. All the scholars trained with the Sufis. Like Shafi may not have been a Sufi himself, but he trained with the Sufis, for instance. Ghazali was a Sufi. If you look at them, they were all influenced by the Sufis. The Sufis have a huge hand in this.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Okay, I would like to know, can you tell us about slavery? Is slavery part of Sharia? Could you explain us?
Yes, of course.
Do you have maybe some example or something?
Okay, for instance, this is from a longer slideshow. I've got this on this is called, if you look for dhimmis on my channel, you'll see my discussion, a very detailed discussion on dhimmis and jizya.
Because, sorry for interrupting you, because as I realized, the slavery never stopped existing in Sharia law, right?
It's permanent. It's permanent. Here's an example. A dhimmi is technically a semi-slave, but a dhimmi is properly speaking, a prisoner of war. Right? A dhimmi in Islam has the same legal rights and is of the same legal status as a prisoner of war. You must understand that. Now notice it says here in the Reliance, section 0914, when an adult male is taken captive, the caliph considers the interests of Islam and the Muslims and decides between the prisoner's death, slavery, release without paying anything, or ransoming him in exchange for money or for a Muslim captive held by the enemy. If the prisoner becomes a Muslim before the caliph chooses any of the 4 alternatives, then he may not be killed, and one of the other 3 alternatives is chosen. And notice it says here, it is permissible in jihad to cut down the enemy's trees and destroy their houses. Muslims love to tell you, but in Islamic war, you can't cut down trees, and it says exactly the opposite in the Sharia. Now notice, enslaving or killing prisoners of war are war crimes and crimes against humanity. However, it is a permanent part of Islamic law. That's just one example.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Also heard a lot about that, yeah, and read a lot about that. And
now, just so you know, this is the Reliance. This is a book review on Islam QA. The Reliance of the Traveler. It is hard to praise this book enough. It stands without equal or competitor as the primary Sunni manual of Islam in English. There is no other book that comes close, bar none. This is not only because of the relevance of its content, but also because of its rigor. See, this book has high praise. Islam QA is visited by, I think, up to 400 million Muslims a month. So
that is crazy.
If they're
crazy.
lying, yeah.
And Islam Q&A also, yeah.
Yeah. So Islam QA is the biggest Islamic advice site in the world. Now, so for instance, this one is called the Hidayah. Right. This is the main Hanafi book of fiqh, the Hidayah. This is the main. Now, the largest school of jurisprudence in Islam is the Hanafi school, and this is their main manual. This is the most important manual in the Hanafi school. Right. This one is
and also same controversial teachings or similar. No difference.
This one is even the Reliance is like a compendium. It has a little bit of everything, so it doesn't always go into detail. Whereas the Reliance is originally was 800 pages. It's 1109 English with some additions. Whereas this one is over 2,653 pages.
It is not something you would want to your child before bed, to read your child before bed.
No, I can't explain to you. I've read a lot of this stuff, and it's made me want to. I've honestly sat here in shock. I can't explain to the emotional impact this has had on me, how long it took me to get used to this. But I've sat here wanting to cry. I've sat here in anger. I've sat here in shock because. And
You know what is funny? Because these Hanafi Muslims, they are mostly on Balkans, and they when something is controversial in Islam, they will say, "Oh, there's our Hanbalism," but we don't see any difference when we talk to them. We say Muhammad married a 6-year-old, and they don't have anything to respond because they also have to believe that. And now, when you show me this book, also it is crazy, yeah, really crazy. Amputations, I see, and so on.
Yeah, there were some questions. There were people wanting to ask some questions. I saw there was.
Later, I will later put one man into the stream.
Amir Ismailovic.
No, he would like to talk about Bible. He's a Muslim probably, and he likes to talk about Kaaba. Okay, we can say about Kaaba.
About nonsense. I've no.
Is the Kaaba? Please tell. Is Kaaba the only Kaaba? You can briefly say. No.
No, historically there were numerous Kaabas spread around the Middle East. The Kaaba that Muslims are probably wanting to talk about is the original Kaaba that Muhammad would have referenced is in Yemen. And
that is written in the Hadiths also, as I know. Yeah,
there's discussion on that. But for instance, hold on. Let me just do this then. Just bring it up. It'll take a while for that to load. I'm bringing it off the cloud. I should have loaded the local copy. But so understand. We were talking about various things. So while that loads, so the Hidayah. If we look at the Hidayah, you'll notice the Hidayah is very detailed. Now, notice here, it speaks here on the manner of waging war, right? Of plunder and the division thereof. Now, plunder is when pirates attack a ship, they take plunder. Or when pirates attack a village, they take plunder. Now, if Islam is a beautiful religion, why in their legal books do they speak of plunder and dividing plunder? Right? You know that the Vikings supposedly went around raping and pillaging and plundering. This is what criminals do. This is what violent criminals do, right? And then notice that on the conquests of infidels, conquest, I thought Islam's a religion of peace. And it says here it's on page 183, okay? And of tithe and tribute, of jizya and capitation tax, of the laws concerning apostates. Notice there's a lot of laws here. And within this also, we'd have to get the right book, but there will be books on slaves. Slavery is very much a part of Islamic law. Notice here they speak here in book 12 of the absconding of slaves. Right? What happens when you're a slave? So remember, the Sharia can never be abrogated. It is permanent for all time. And if it discusses it in the Sharia, it is permanently a part of Islam. It may not be implemented yet because we don't have a caliphate yet. But if there is a caliphate, they will have to start implementing this, just like they have under the Taliban in Afghanistan and under ISIS in Syria.
Yeah, really, really shocking. About Kaaba, did it load it, or shall we go to another question?
Yeah, it would have loaded by now, yeah. So you just, sorry about that. Okay, so I want to show this. Okay, so I want to load this here. This is a short discussion from one of my talks called monotheism, right? It's called monotheism. I'll just put the name up here. I have a series called Monotheism. It's a study on the history of Islam, going back into pre-Islamic times and to Yemen and Ethiopia, which are very, very important in Islamic history. There's a lot of references to Yemen and Ethiopia. And so let me go to this one item here. We're speaking of the Sabaeans. Now, the Sabaeans in the Bible were the enemies of the Jews. They were the ones who attacked Job, right? And they killed Job's family, stole Job's family's oxen. These are the ones that, and Abraham was supposedly a Sabaean before Abraham started worshipping Yahweh. When Abraham smashed all the idols in his father's shop and decided to leave them for Yahweh, right, and became a worshiper of Yahweh and started effectively Judaism, that lineage, he was a Sabaean. So he was a worshiper of the moon god. Now, notice the Sabaeans. This is the Muslim writer Muhammad Shukri al-Alusi, who died in 1854, born in 1802. He compared the religious practices of the Sabaeans to Islam in his Bulugh al-Arab fi Ahwal al-Arab. And he said Arabs during the pre-Islamic period used to practice things that were included in the Islamic Sharia. For example, they did not marry both a mother and her daughter. They considered marrying two sisters simultaneously to be the most heinous crime. They censured anyone who married his stepmother. They made major Hajj and minor Umrah pilgrimage to the Kaaba. They performed the circumambulation around the Kaaba. They ran 7 times between Safa and Marwa. They threw rocks and washed themselves after sexual intercourse. They gargled, sniffed water up their noses, clipped their fingernails, removed pubic hair, and performed ritual circumcision. They cut off the right hand of a thief, and they stoned adulterers.
So, in other words, you want to say that when Muslims go around Kaaba, it is total pagan practice. Yeah. That it's incredible, because today Muslims go to that same Kaaba and kiss that black stone, and we can also see that in the Hadiths also most Muslims mention that to Muhammad, that they saw pagans kiss that stone, and only because Muhammad did it, they started to kissing the stone. But pagans also before they did it, and they were circulating naked also. Yeah.
So let's have a look. Let me finish this, and I'll go on to another question that came in as well. But so the Sabaeans have 5 prayers, similar to the 5 prayers of the Muslims. Others say they have 7 prayers, 5 of which are comparable to the prayers of the Muslims with regards to time, and the 6th at midnight and the 7th at forenoon. Now notice that Islam has 5 prayers, but also you have the option of 2 additional prayers. So they have the same prayer structure. It is their practice to pray over the dead without kneeling down or bending the knee. They fast for 1 lunar month of 30 days. They start their fast at the last watch of the night and continue till the setting of the sun. Some of their sects fast during the month of Ramadan. They face the Kaaba when they pray. They venerate Mecca and believe in making the pilgrimage to it. For these guys, Mecca was in Yemen, right? They consider dead bodies, blood, and the flesh of pigs is unlawful, which is actually, oddly enough, taken from the Bible. These rules come out from Noah. They also forbid marriage for the same reasons as do Muslims. So understand, Islam is originally a pagan practice, and these people were the enemies of the Jews in the Bible, right? Abraham was a pagan like this when Abraham left to follow Yahweh, and Muslims still follow the same practices because they believe they're following the religion of Abraham, and they reject Judaism, they reject Christianity, they follow the original religion of Abraham, which was Sabaeanism, according to the Bible and according to the Jews.
Yeah, really, really shocking. Could you explain us what do Sharia books say about Islamic paradise?
That's more of a religious question. It's not one that I really go into. This is not something that I go into. It's like, I don't care whether they give you a white Toyota or a blue Ferrari in Islamic heaven.
Okay, I saw that about Islamic homosexuality. This is from something from Turkey. Okay, we don't have to.
It's pretty common. As someone says, can I mention something about bacha since homosexuality is normally considered haram? Nothing is haram in Islam. I'm sorry, man. You have no idea. You see, Islam has a concept called hiyal.
What is that?
Hiyal is what we would know in the West as eristic. It goes back to the pagan Greeks. It was copied by the Muslims, and it was very common as well within Europe in the 15th century or 16th century, and it made its way into atheism as well. And it is the practice of lying. It's using rhetoric to tell lies. It is sophistry. We know it as sophistry, the ability to lie very, very well. Atheism is built upon this. Islam is built upon this. They call it hiyal. Everyone knows about taqiyya, but the most important form of lying, the grandfather, the umbrella under which everything else falls, is called hiyal. I'll just actually give me a moment here, and I will. So the grandfather of lying in Islam is called hiyal. Okay, not taqiyya. Hiyal is the most important form of lying in Islam. In the West, we would know it as eristic, arguing for the sake of argument, never losing, never losing an argument, but having clever answers for everything, whether the answer is right or wrong. It's not about finding truth. It's about winning the argument. This goes back to sophistry and the Greek sophists. This influences atheism as well, which is built on the very same premise. Okay. Now, someone asked about, with hiyal permits you to circumvent any Islamic law. Any law can be circumvented using legal trickery, verbal trickery. But not only that, there are laws in Islam, okay, like rukhsa and azima, and there's various other, there are rules and rulings within Islam which allow you to break any Islamic law without penalty. And thus you can break anything and everything. There is not a single law, not one in Islam, that is unable to be broken. So let me have a look at this book, Islamic Homosexualities.
Okay, but I wouldn't show those pictures. I know that there are some pictures here, but I saw that. Here. Yeah, I saw that in your streams, and shows. Yeah, okay,
let's just say that having your way with young boys is a long tradition in Islam.
Okay, that is tradition. I know, but somebody asked also that homosexuality is. We have to be honest and say nowadays is considered haram in Islam, right?
Is bacha haram? It happens all the time, every day.
Okay, it's not, but Muslims don't practice it.
Every single rule in Islam has an out. Every single rule, every single law has an out. There is not a single thing in Islam that doesn't have its opposite that is allowed.
I understand, yeah. Okay, but maybe Muslims today they don't know their religion, their sacred teachings from these books, and I think that is maybe the reason why they don't want to Sharia to be implemented. Most of them.
Most of them, who knows? I mean, the point is that they have to implement it. It doesn't matter. Put it this way. You can say, but it's just a small minority that wants it. Okay, let's go look at the US government, for instance. There are, 110 senators or whatever, or, I mean, they've got the Senate and they've got the Congress. So there's like 110 senators and like 400 congressmen. So it's 550 people. The US has over 330 million people. So obviously, this 450 people or 500 people doesn't matter because it's just a small minority, except that small minority is in charge. That small minority makes the decisions. That small minority implements the decisions. So John Q. Muslim doesn't matter. He's unimportant. He's irrelevant. What matters is what the scholars are going to implement. He goes along or they will kill him. It's as simple as that. Ljubljana asks, as for Sharia, what does Sharia say about pedophiles? We just covered that in depth. We did some detail on that, and I have detail on that on my channel. Just look at marriage and so on in my channel. But
you can watch all on Lloyd's channel, Lloyd de Jong. Just type it into YouTube, and you now mentioned the politicians and so on. Could you tell us on Islamic lobby in the world? I saw that you have a video on your channel. I haven't looked that one. I watched many of your videos about. Maybe you can say a few words about that. If you remember.
The yeah, the Islamic lobby. So actually, no, let me close this. I need to go here. So the Islamic lobby is very, very well funded. They are extremely wealthy. They are very well connected politically, and they are highly influential. And again, everyone says, oh, the Jews this, the Jews that. The Jews don't have oil. Saudi Arabia makes far more money than Israel ever will. And there's a whole lot of Muslims. There's like, what, 1.7 billion Muslims? There's about 14 million Jews maximum. These people have a lot more resources, they have a lot more money, and they're doing a lot more. The Islamic lobby is extremely powerful, is extremely well connected. And they, now notice, let's have a quick look at the Palestinians since, okay? Notice here, the Palestinians, right? Also, if we go back here, you'll notice this is the Youth Club of Palestine. This was the Nazi Youth Club of Palestine. So the Palestinians had a Nazi Youth Club, right? The Palestinians still have Nazi flags, the Aryan salute. This is the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. He's a very pious Muslim. I'll remember the sect in a minute. But yeah, this is him with Goering and Himmler and all the other guys. He was a Nazi. He volunteered for the Nazis. So these guys were very heavily connected. So the Palestinians have a very strong tradition, ties to Nazism. And
yeah. Okay, anti-Semitism is also part of the, we can say, of Quran, because Jews are worst enemies. They are we are Christians are straight, but the enemies of Allah are Jews, and Isa will kill the Jews when he returns, in their view. So I think that is part of it because of that also.
So in terms of the lobby, so these people are lobbying against Israel because, you know, they say they're for Palestine. They're not. They're against Israel. Notice Saudi Arabia is America's #1 weapons customer. People don't realize. Notice on this list, Israel doesn't even appear. Okay? For 9 years in this period, Saudi Arabia was their biggest customer for weapons, right? So if you look at the amount of money, the amount of resources that goes to Saudi, it is enormous. Okay? The influence of big oil is far more insidious and far more pervasive than the influence of the Jewish lobby. For oil and influence seep across ideological as well as party lines without public approval or support. So the oil lobby, this is Senator Thomas McIntyre, okay? And he acknowledged the influence of the Israeli lobby, which he says reflects the will of a strong majority of Americans. Now, what needs to be noted is that Americans support Israel. Israel is popular. The Muslims are not. So the Muslims have had to use their money to buy support. They've had to bribe people, okay? Now, he said the Jewish lobby is not in the same league as the Arab lobby, which has a lot of money. AIPAC, for instance, people will talk about that. AIPAC is money raised in America, donated to Israel voluntarily by Jews and Christians, right? Whereas the Arab lobby is funded by basically jihadis, okay? These guys have defense contractors, former government officials, 21 Arab states. There's only one Jewish state. Corporations with business interests in the Middle East, banks. The amount of Arab money in the banks in the US is phenomenal. It's in the trillions of dollars. Why don't we talk about this? This is money that Israel couldn't hope to raise.
But how is that Muslims are in alignment with we can say kafirs, USA, and so is that part of the taqiyya and deceivement?
Well, yeah, of course they must use anything and everything to get their job, to do what they want to do. They're allowed to do anything. Notice Saudi lobbying. Saudi lobbying is massive. They spend huge amounts of money. Okay, Trump was actually anti-Saudi. He was very much against. He was going against them, so they had to triple their lobbying money to try to get around the bans and the blocks that Trump was putting on them, for instance. So these guys, the Saudi lobby moves from K Street to Main Street. I mean, these guys are heavily connected. This is Prince Bandar bin Sultan, Bandar Bush. Okay, these guys are Nelson Mandela, one of the great peacemakers of our time, a great man. Okay, so this guy, he can land his plane privately at the British Air Force base, right? This guy is connected to, he's just heavily connected. Look at this. I mean, the people that he is connected to. This just goes everywhere. And people don't talk about this. They don't discuss it. These guys are friends with all sorts of people. So, I mean, there's an entire show on this. I have a couple of episodes on this on my channel. And these guys are heavily connected and heavily funded. They have incredible amounts of money. Right.
Okay, can you tell us what do Islamic Sharia books say about offensive jihad? Because I've heard about a lot of Muslims. Oh, we only have a defensive jihad. We must not attack anyone first.
That's
and
a lie.
did you know that in Bosnian Quran they've inserted words that you don't have in any translation in English and also in Arabic, so that it seems that you can defend yourself, but it is totally false. And so you can see how they lie even in the translations of the Quran. It's crazy. So Bosnian Quran from Besim Korkut is his name, famous translator of the Quran in Bosnia. It's really awful translation, and it's just a kia. And I would like to say you about what the Islamic Sharia books say about offensive jihad.
Okay, yeah, so you can go to the Reliance, you can look up the definition of jihad in the Reliance. I'm going to go, for this case, to the Hidayah. The Reliance is pretty clear. Jihad in Islam...
Just zoom it, please, a little bit.
Yeah. Jihad in Islam is warfare on non-Muslims to establish Islam. So jihad is legally defined. So you can have many definitions. There are about 13 or 14 kinds of jihad according to Islamic scholars. There's like 14 different kinds of jihad. But the only valid form that has a legal definition in the Sharia is warfare against non-Muslims, violence against non-Muslims to establish Islam. So let's have a look at the Hidayah, what the Hidayah says on this topic. So this is a chapter called The Institute. So I'm going to go here. This is book 9, Hidayah, volume 2. And it says, Sayyir, in the language of the law. This is the Sirah, where we get the term Sirah, the biographies of the Prophet. More especially applies to the institutes of the Prophet in his wars, the Sunnah of the Prophet in his wars. And they speak here on the manner of waging war and of plunder and the conquest of infidels. So I'll quickly go through this. So yeah, I'd like to finish at 9:30 my time. So we'll go another 12 or 13
No problem,
minutes.
no problem.
So I'll finish this and you can ask some questions and take it from there. So, yeah, so Samir is obviously losing his cool here because notice it says here, war must be carried on against the infidels at all time by some party of the Muslims. So a small minority of Muslims must always be making jihad, or they will incur the punishment of Allah for the crime of not following the law of jihad. It says here, the sacred law concerning war is sufficiently observed when it is carried on by any party or tribe of Muslims, and it is then no longer of any force with respect to the rest of the Muslims. As long as some Muslims are doing jihad, the rest are absolved for now. Until there's open warfare, then they are all required to get involved in warfare. It is established as a divine law by the word of Allah, who said in the Quran, slay the infidels, and by the Prophet, war is permanently established until the day of judgment. And it is done for the purpose of advancing the true faith of Islam. And their meaning here, they say, is jihad fard, or ordained war, okay, to be waged against infidels, the holy war. So this is the ruling. Let's continue, and I'll go through these rulings so we can see exactly what the Quran says here. Right? If a party of Muslims make war, it is no longer binding upon the rest. That's why some crazy Muslim will always go and kill things, because that's the law. If no Muslims were to make war, the whole of the Ummah would incur the criminality of neglecting it. So if no Muslims killed people in jihad, killed non-Muslims in jihad, the entire Ummah would be guilty of sinning against Allah, and it would be a crime in the eyes of Allah, and the Muslims would then be condemned to hell. So they must make jihad or be condemned to hell. Let me continue. The destruction of the sword is incurred by infidels, although they are not the first aggressors, as appears from various passages in the sacred writings which are received to this effect. And it states here, infidels may be attacked without provocation. Infidels may be attacked without reason. So understand, the destruction of the sword, meaning death by the sword, even if you didn't do anything to them first. Okay? Notice they mean qital, meaning war in its operation, such as fighting, slaying. So that's how they will define war. So let me continue here. Just to give you some more insight here. So when the Muslims enter the enemy's country and they besiege the cities or strongholds of the infidels, it is necessary to invite them to embrace Islam, right? If they embrace the faith, it is unnecessary to make war on them, because that which was the design of the war is then obtained without war. So they must make war upon you to make you a Muslim. And if you do so, then they don't have to make war. You become a Muslim. Then they don't have to. The Prophet has said, we are directed to make war upon men until such time as they shall confess the Shahada, which is not in the Quran, by the way. Semir Smailovich, please tell me on which page in the Quran is the full Shahada. Because if it's not in the Quran, it's false. And since it's not in the Quran, it's made by men, it's false. Why do you follow Shahada that is not in the Quran? Please let me know in the comments. Right? Be useful for a moment. Yeah. So now, they must say the Shahada, but when they repeat this creed, their persons and their properties, their lives and their properties are safe from us. They must pay the jizya or capitation tax. And if they submit to this tax, right, the war is forbidden and terminated, so they can become a jizya. Okay? So they can pay the jizya. Now notice, he said here, the Prophet instructed his commanders to call the infidels to the faith because people will perceive that they are attacked for the sake of religion. Notice, attacked for the sake of religion and not for taking their property. Sure. So on this consideration, it is possible that they may be induced to agree to the call to become Muslims in order to save themselves from the troubles of war. But now I need to mention one last section. If a Muslim attacks infidels without calling them to the faith of Islam, he is an offender because this is forbidden. But, and remember I said earlier that every single Islamic law has an opposite that cancels it out. Every single law. But yet, if a Muslim does attack non-Muslims before inviting them, and he kills them, he slays them, and he takes their property, there's no fine. There is no expiation. There is no atonement. Because Islam, which would have protected them, does not exist in them. So don't do it. It's illegal. But if you do kill them, if you do take their properties, it's okay. Do you understand the hypocrisy here? Notice, Muslims will tell you, like Muslims, like Samir, answer the question, where is the full Shahada in the Quran? Show me. Give me the page reference. Give me the verse, whatever you need to do. Show me in the Quran. If it's not in the Quran, then it was fake. It was added afterwards. So show me where's the Shahada in the Quran.
I think you won't get an answer.
Of course, he can't. Now, notice, Muslims like Samir will be happy to tell us, but the Quran forbids killing of women and babies. Well, no, it does not. That is a complete lie. In the Hanafi Hidayah, it says here, in the same manner as the slaying of women or infant children of infidels is forbidden. Oh, wow. The slaying of women or infant children of infidels is forbidden, but if a person were to slay them, he is not liable to a fine. Oh, you killed these women and infants? Oh, there's no fine. Thanks, have a nice day. You understand? This is the legal definition of jihad. It is murder without penalty. You can kill, and it says so in the reliance. It says you can kill non-Muslims without penalty. There is no penalty for murdering a non-Muslim.
Awful, yeah. Okay, we have 7 more minutes, so there is Alexander is not here. But okay, we'll go further, and 7 minutes, okay, and we'll wrap it up. Then we'll stop it. Then, and what do Islamic Sharia books say how to treat women? Can you tell us a little about this, maybe?
You've seen the evidence that I've brought so far, but Islamic law, women are owned, women are property, of course, and you can sell your little girl to a man to be married. She can be young. And
I also saw that in Islam Q&A site. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, that shocked me also. You can sell your daughter and to another man. That's crazy.
Yes.
In Sharia law. Yeah.
Of course. And if she's 6 months old and this guy marries her and decides to take her to bed that night, well, she has no choice, right? This is legal. Your wife can definitely be, you can, this is legal, right? I don't want to say the words for the YouTube thing, so obviously, but it is perfectly legal to, take something.
Yeah, Quran says that. Yeah. Although Muslims would say, do it lightly, but that's not the case. Yeah, it's...
No, the Sharia goes into much more detail. Like, for instance, the Quran might have one verse, 10 words. The Sharia will have 15 pages on the topic, 20 pages, 30 pages, 40 pages describing exactly. See, the Sharia is far more detailed.
Yeah. Okay, now we will have one question from Alexander. Alexander, evo, molim te, pitaj Lloyda, evo što si ga htio pitat na engleski, naravno.
Hello, Lloyd, how are you?
Hi there, good, thank you. Alexander, how can I do for you?
I also watch your shows a couple of times. Yes, I want to, well, I noticed something. You said, for instance, for the Sharia, that what is the ijma, the consensus of the scholars, that is like obeying and for all times, right? Yeah, but as you said, they find somehow the way around it. So, for instance, all the first scholars, even Al-Tabari and all others, believed that, for instance, Abraham wanted to sacrifice Isaac. And because of the politics and the time of the Ibn Kathir, they decided that is wrong and that Abraham wanted to sacrifice Ishmael. And even they did not do it by some Islamic science methodology, because most of the sources, Islamic sources, actually oldest 11 Sahabas, companions of Muhammad, said that Abraham wanted to sacrifice Isaac. And because of the politics, you know, it's a little bit tricky to be Muslim, and well, Abraham want to sacrifice.
What is your question, please? What is your question?
What is the how they managed to escape that? You know, because all the sources, first sources, and all the first teachings of the scholars, ijma was that Abraham want to sacrifice Isaac. But
you're allowed to lie. You're allowed to lie. You can lie about anything in Islam at any time for any reason. I didn't cover that. I have videos on my channel about this. You can lie. If it benefits Islam, it is good. If it puts the image of Islam in a good light, it is good. If it helps, it is good. Because someone who tells a lie that brings a good to Islam is not considered a liar. I'm just going to quickly go to, I'm going to share something, and I'll show you. Because anything that brings Islam into embarrassment is considered illegal. If you can see my screen here. Notice this is from a book called, so this is relevant here. This is called the book called The Unsheathed Sword Against the One Who Insults the Messenger. So you must take your sword out and kill anyone who insults Islam, the Messenger, or Allah. Notice the book is about the Messenger. It doesn't say the one who insults Allah, right? Notice here, whoever insults the Prophet is to be killed, whether they are Muslim or a disbeliever. Killing is prescribed on the one who insults the Prophet, and you cannot show mercy to him, okay? Any Muslim or non-Muslim who insults the Prophet is to be killed. There is no repentance sought. I'm quickly going to step forward here. The objective of this book, the Sharia manual, is to clarify the Islamic ruling on the subject, that the one who insults Muhammad, whether Muslim or disbeliever, is to be killed. So in other words, whatever benefits Islam is good, right? They have to be killed even if they pay a protective tax in a Muslim state. And I will just go, the general view of the scholars, the ijma, is that whoever insults Muhammad is to be killed. The Muslims have unanimous agreement when killing whoever insults the Prophet. It is the ruling that whoever insults other than Muhammad, other than the Prophet, is to be lashed. So you can insult Allah and you'll be lashed, but insult Muhammad, you'll be killed.
And that is book from famous Ibn Taymiyyah, right?
Correct. So understand, now this consensus is the consensus of the companions of Allah's Messenger as well. Notice, just keeps on going, keeps on going. Now notice here, whoever insults the Messenger, which means to attribute a defect to him. In other words, you don't believe that Muhammad is absolutely perfect. Then such a person is a disbeliever. The Muslim who insults is killed. There is no disagreement. This is the view of the four Imams and other than them. And I do not know anyone who differed concerning the obligation of killing such a person. This book just goes on and on and on, talking about to be killed, 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 killed. It just goes on and on about this is the political killing, 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 is to be killed, killing, 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 killing. You understand?
Why don't liberal Muslims call those Ibn Taymiyyah and those all those Sharia giants, former imams? Why don't they call them Islamophobes and so on? Why? Because these are so controversial.
They're not controversial. This is standard, normal, regular, everyday, Monday to Friday, Saturday to Sunday Islam. This is normal. They just need to implement this slowly until eventually it becomes the law of the entire world.
Okay, Lloyd, you have to go now, and please, final words now. What is behind Islam, and is Islam actually a cult, in your opinion? Just final words. And
satanic. It's satanic. No. To be satanic, I know the word satanic needs to be defined correctly, but satanic is to oppose God. Doesn't mean that you worship Satan necessarily, although indirectly that's probably the case. Because if you reject one thing, you have to accept another, right? It's opposite. But it opposes God in every aspect. It opposes the moral law of God, of the Bible, in every way. It opposes the law of the West, which is based basically on Christian Western or Christian moral views and values. So it is satanic. And now understand, if you go back historically, it is pagan. It is the paganism that was the enemy of the Jews and the enemies of God way back 3,000, 4,000 years ago. This is now, if you go back to the time of the early Jews, before the time of Abraham, the time of Job and so on in those stories, the Sabaeans were pagans. They were Babylonian moon worshippers. They worshipped the god of Babylon, quite literally worshipped the god of Babylon. They called this god Makkah, right? And now the holy city of Islam is called Makkah. So the Sabaeans worshipped Makkah, right? Allah, at the time of Muhammad's birth and before Muhammad, Allah was called Hubal, okay? He who is Baal. Baal was the god of the Kaaba in Mecca, supposedly, and this is Baal, right? We know he who is Baal, and Baal was the Allah of the Kaaba. So Allah is Baal, and so now, and then on top of that, they took Gnosticism. So they layered Gnosticism on top to give it this pseudo-biblical impression, to make it look, but it's really just paganism mixed with Gnosticism, mixed with sophistry. And it's entirely anti-Christian, it's entirely anti-biblical, and it's very much satanic. Yeah. It opposes the God of the Bible.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your questions and for your answers, and that you willingly came to my channel, and it was great. I was delighted that you wanted to be here, and so this would be it for this show, and thanks very much, Lloyd, and I hope maybe again we could maybe sometime again we could make something similar. It was great. And
Alexander, if I may answer one last thing. So if you read the Sirah, the biographies of Muhammad replaces Jesus. He becomes the new Jesus. He's greater than Jesus. He, in fact, is a partner with Allah. They copy the whole Gospel of Matthew. They copy the whole idea that Muhammad was with Allah at the beginning. Muhammad is made from the same spirit as Allah. Muhammad is made directly from the Tawhid. Muhammad is worshipped in heaven before Muhammad came to earth. Muhammad is with Allah for hundreds of thousands of years. The earth was made for Muhammad. Muhammad becomes Jesus, and therefore they've got to replace everything in the Bible with Islamic symbolism, because they are trying to replace Christianity with their own false view.
Thank you. Are you talking about Sabaeans from the Yemen, or Sabaeans that here again?
Sabaeans from Yemen, the Sabaeans from Yemen, and of course there's someone called Vengo da Eternita who's also just talking.
No, he loves to spoil and spam and troll. He's
trash.
Yeah, he's talking trash. Vengo, hey to you, and we won't bother about him. So if you need to go, okay, and if you want to stay a little bit, you can stay also. So you decide. And
no, God, I'll go. We can catch up another time. We can have another talk. So hopefully this was helpful to your audience and clear to your audience.
Yeah, really great, really great about our other part. And okay, so we'll wrap this up. And it was a great show. And bye from this live stream. I'll just say bye to my audience in my language, and we'll close it. Evo, ništa, dame I gospodo, bilo je to Lloyd Young i intervju s njime večeras, i evo, to je to za večeras. Neka vas sve blagoslovi dragi Bog u imenu Oca, Sina i Duha Svetoga, i vidimo se